Hello and welcome to ARC360's Looking Ahead digital event series. Before starting, we'd just like to say thank you to our corporate partners, the ASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, EMAX, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Merca, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams, as well as our partners, Aztec, Innovation Group, Indasa, the Green Park Specialists, and our latest partner, Casco. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. Another fine session we've got coming up this afternoon with Dean Lander, Head of Repair Sector Services at Thatcham, Kath Holm, Head of Motor and Legal Supply Chain Manager at Co-op Insurance, and Andrew Hooker, Technical Lead at Solus Accident Repair Centres. So looking at the future for repair. So this is the sixth session in Looking Ahead, ARC360 Digital Event Week. So we're looking to round things off nicely. So no pressure on these three panellists, obviously, but it's down to you to finish in a fine way. So here we have, again, you've heard all the names mentioned in the little introduction, but our corporate partners and our partners ARC360. Huge thank you to these people for supporting us throughout the year, and obviously as part of this Looking Ahead Digital Event Week. Before we go too far, as per usual, a little bit of a disclaimer. So the views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, committee or other group or individual. Please respect all contributions, and we encourage you to join the conversation via the interactive functions available. All right, let's bring the screen back, and good to see people joining us again. Lovely to hear from people, so do drop a message in the chat, whether it be to all panelists and attendees, and everyone can see what we're talking about. It's great to see when you're sat on this side of the screen who's involved with the conversation, paying attention. We won't test you, but well, we might do, who knows. And the Q&A, obviously drop any questions in there that you may have as the session materializes. So we're going to do a little round robin of introductions, and I'm sure some of the people sat on the webinar today are very familiar with the industry at large, but first of all, we'll go across to Industry Night. Dean Lander.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark. Dean Lander, Head of Repair Sector Services at Thatcham, and very glad to be here.
Good to have you on, Dean. Thanks for joining us once again. Andrew Hooker.
Hello there. Yeah, I'm Andrew Hooker, Technical Lead for Solus Accident Repair Group. Pleased to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Good to see you again, Andrew. And Kath.
Hi Mark, good afternoon. I'm Kath Hume, Head of Motor and Legal Supply Chain Management at Co-op Insurance.
There we go, very succinct introductions there. Right, we're going to kick off, and I'm going to throw a big one into the pool to start with. So you all come at this from very different perspectives, but let's start with that crystal ball moment that nobody's got the answer to, but I like to get opinions on this. So 10 years from now, the motor claims and repair sector will be, Dean, over to you.
Yeah, nice one to start with, Mark. Nice and gentle lead in. 10 years from now, I suspect that the market will have right-sized for the technology we're seeing today. You know, what we see today as being the big challenge and niche will become the norm, and the market will have adapted to it and right-sized towards it. I think we'll see significant levels of automated driving on some cars, while there'll still be many older cars that have the niche ADAS that we're seeing today. And then there'll be the classic cars on the road that a technician will look at and go, That's got no automation, no ADAS, no HV features on it. How on earth is that car driving on the road today? What makes it work? So, yeah, I think as always, we will evolve. I think at the moment we're seeing a bit of a revolution, but I think that will slow back down into an evolution again. But the industry will adapt, right size, and move forward. But in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about some technology we haven't even thought about yet on a car.
Yes, who knows? Who knows where we will be? Flying cars? Possibly. Kath, over to you. Same question to you. 10 years from now, motor claims sector, where will it be?
I mean, I agree with Dean on the technology point. I think some of the things probably that we won't have even thought of or considered when we get to that point. I think the key thing for me will be customer expectations from a customer journey perspective. I think that will be quite different in 10 years' time. We'll see more digitalisation and customer expectations, I think, will be much higher than they are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, key part of all of it, I'm sure. And Andrew, coming at it from your side, and obviously on the sort of repair side now as well.
I mean, I think we are absolutely going through a critical moment in the industry. I mean, a number of OEM have said recently that, you know, this is like a once in a lifetime period of change. There is so much going on at the moment. So I think in many ways it's going to be unrecognisable. To pick up on what Kath said, I think the customer demands are going to grow and grow, and people will expect a different level of service and even a different customer model, which I don't think we can rule out. The pace of technology, I see no signs of that relaxing. I think if anything, it's just going to get faster and faster as more and more technologies and more entrants come into the market. And, you know, I think Dean's kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of some of the old, you know, we have to manage generation upon generation of technology in terms of there will still be some of the older, more redundant technologies or outgoing technologies where we still need to manage the new stuff today. You know, so I think it's going to be a far more complex industry than it's ever been and far more demanding, but probably a lot more agile and forward-looking.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's been evidenced over the past few months in terms of how much the industry has moved and can move for the future. So let's drill down a little bit into these kind of, you know, technologies and bits and pieces for the future. So the ADAS, diagnostics, recalibration, self-authorization of claims, triage of claims, accelerated payments, all of these things have been mentioned in previous weeks on webinars that we've done. There are now almost kind of, well, they are key components of the sector, but there's also been mentions of AI, AR, 3D printing. They're all gaining momentum and, you know, coming into the view of the industry, if you like. More automated customer managed interactions, all these things. So it's all going on around us at the moment. Is it inevitable that all of these will come? And I'll come to you, Andrew, on that, if I may, in the first instance.
Well, actually, I think everything you've mentioned so far is actually already here. You know, we can see examples of this stuff pretty much all the time. And a number of them were actually, you know, as I say, are available on cars today. You know, augmented realities here. I see a new AI system almost every day. I think an incredible number, a large percentage of them aren't actually AI systems. There's a lot of machine learning out there, and genuine AI isn't quite grabbing hold as much as it could. But I think a lot of it's here, and it's just a question, I think, for those of us of a certain generation who remember the old Betamax VHS issue, you know, they're going to have their time, and if they don't reach the market in the right maturity, then they're going to probably may die out and be replaced by something else. But, you know, I think they're all going to form part of it. Certainly 3D printing, additive manufacturing, what you want to call it, is going to be part of our life very soon, and it's growing very, very rapidly. But most of these other technologies will all be there. You know, there's more and more people in the automotive sector than we've ever seen before. You've got your Microsofts, your Apples, all these sort of people that historically would never have been in that space are now in that area. So we're going to see technologies moving forward because these cars are becoming more like mobile phones, and people expect their mobile phones to be updated every year. People will be expecting the same from their car, you know, and their car to be compatible with their lifestyle.
Yes, yes, very, very true. And yeah, you've almost maybe turned a bit outdated by asking if they're coming, but we'll forgive you on that. And Kath, from your side, from where you sit in the insurance side of the world, how do you see these things? Again, is it inevitable? They're all going to come at some stage in phases, or is it all going to land on us at once?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, most of us are all using a lot of the things that you mentioned. And I think there'll be varying degrees of how much take up certain things have. We all got very excited about AI a few years ago when it was going to take over the world. And has it really? Yes, it's helped us maybe with some efficiency and fraud detection, things like that. But you still need people and processes to run the business. So I agree with Andrew. I think we are all doing all these things. I'm not sure the 3D printing thing, how would a customer feel about that? I think there's quite a lot of consumer education that we need to do, because I can imagine, trying to explain to my mum I'm going to print a part for her would probably scare her to death from a safety perspective. So I think there will be a bit of education to do as we go through the next few years, if that's the direction of travel where we're going to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dean, from where you sit, again, a different perspective on things, but all of this is kind of coming together and bubbling away under the surface, and Kath's touched on the people element as well, which is obviously crucial to all of it.
Yeah, we're technical experts around the car at Thatcher, not necessarily the people bit around the claims, but we're definitely reaching a time where there's a real world possibility that the car could potentially make a claim by itself and not need the human interaction. And I think that's the big thing to look out for on the horizon. As Andrew quite rightly said, everything that you listed out at the start, we've seen it, we've taken it apart, we've put it back together again, we've analysed it, and it's there, it's available, but the market dynamics aren't ready for it. But the market dynamics need to be ready for a totally contactless claims process where a car has the level of intelligence and communication capability within it to sense the impact, estimate the severity, using that kind of data analytics, connects directly to the insurer or the VM, calls the recovery truck, even notifies the police if it can't continue driving, and actually book itself into a repair shop. The data, the connected solution of the car being connected to the infrastructure, will allow it to talk directly to Kath and say, look, I've just been in a bump. It was at this speed. I felt that these sorts of forces in this direction or altitude, I need to go to that body shop that has the capability to repair me. And I've called this recovery truck because that recovery truck specialises in aluminium HV vehicles. Can you just authorise it, please?
Amazing place to be. Now with that, and again, kind of, I suppose that's almost an idealistic place that we will end up in at some stage. How we'll get there is still to play out. But are we also kind of, with all this change and technology advancements taking place around us, are we in danger of kind of taking on too much too soon, getting consumed by trying to have a piece of everything rather than focusing, if you like, on one entity and developing that ourselves? And do we need to be a bit more selective in terms of where we target our attentions? Kath, I'm going to come to you first, if I may, on that one.
I think it's a difficult one sometimes because you don't always understand the opportunity of something when you first look at it until you start using it. But I agree, sometimes as an industry we can take on too much and end up not delivering very much. So I think it is all about prioritising what we do, and then obviously the business case against that, as we do with all projects that we're working on.
And in sort of, from your side of an insurer, just so we understand it generally a little bit more, but how would you kind of explore those new technologies or those new innovations that you're looking at? How does it sort of function, really?
To be honest, tends to be proof of concept pilots that most insurers would use and work with partners to develop propositions, whatever that may be, from a transformational perspective. Obviously quite a lot of this stuff is very expensive, so we do sometimes have to be selective which projects we choose, just because we can't always do everything that we want to do. And as with any business case, it's looking at time to deliver and then pay back for that development and that investment that we've made. But it's not all about cost saving, it's about customer journey, mitigation of risk. With all the technology out there, that's obviously a concern, to make sure that we are able to push things through the right supply chain and repair things appropriately, which is probably going to become more of a challenge as we move through the next few years, to make sure that we have that hybrid of capability, because we're going to really need that, because our car park will still be a mixture of older and newer vehicles, as Andrew and Dean have already touched on.
And I suppose with so much changing and at such pace, it must be, it's challenging to almost future forecast, what the payback on these things will be sometimes, because they're moving at such a rate of knots.
I think that's the challenge. Sometimes you can do something, and by the time you've actually implemented it, the technology's changed and moved on. We've all seen that over the last few years. So it's about trying to future-proof it as well, so you're not behind the curve as soon as you've put something in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew, from your side, I can see you're nodding in agreement lots there with what Kath said. But, again, are we sort of in danger of becoming all consumed and almost losing our focus, I suppose, on where we should be directing our attentions?
It's a difficult one, because I think there's so much stuff that is actually coming our way. I've never been deluged with technology like we are at the moment. As I say, the pace of it is staggering. I'm kind of thinking, much as this year has been a horrendous year for obvious reasons, I think one of the things that has come out of it is just how adaptable businesses and people have become. I think if any of us sat back and thought where we were sitting for having our Christmas dinner last year and the year that we've just had, we would all be wrong, wouldn't we? Ultimately, we've all had to adapt to different ways of life, different ways of business and that sort of thing. So I think, if anything, businesses are getting a lot quicker at adapting to new things. I think technology is obviously still rolling out. We're seeing vehicles being delivered without any sort of prototyping, etc. That people are finding new ways of working, new ways to be successful. So I think people are actually adapting very, very well. So I think going forward, we can start looking at some of this stuff and think, yeah, you know what, we can take that in our stride. And it's not that much of it should be a surprise. We've been talking about electric vehicles for 10 years. We've been talking about connected car for 5 years. Every OEM has a 10, 15 year strategy, sometimes even further than that at the moment with the shift towards e-mobility. You only have to have the conversation, and we're really starting to pick up some really strong conversations now with some OEM who are really keen to understand, to look after mutual customers, share us with, your direction with us. And, we can actually plan and help ourselves, get ourselves into that right position to look after these customers. It's not easy, but I think everybody's actually getting better at it.
Yeah. And I suppose, from a repairer perspective, you're obviously on that side of the fence now, if you like. You're a big group, you're part of a big organisation, but I suppose taking it from an independent level as well, a repairer, how do you sort of envisage that they would move with all of this at the same time? It's much
harder. As I say, you've got to feel for some of these guys that, as I say, if you are sort of putting together a strategy looking forward, I think probably this year people have been sort of struggling to get through to next week. As I say, it's been a very, very, very tough year for people, and you've really got to be looking out there and thinking, all these things coming my way, where do I invest? Training, equipment, infrastructure. It's got to be a very, very difficult thing if you can't have these conversations, and if, as I say, you haven't got that right source of information. How do I know where to invest and what to do with my business? You get harbingers of doom of that cars are going to repair themselves at one point and these sort of things. Not in my lifetime. It's a very, very difficult thing for them. And as I say, they have to be adaptive. And as I say, at the moment, it is extremely difficult to plan 1 week to the next of knowing when your parts are going to be delivered or not, because your supplier might have closed down for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose somebody here to hold the hands of independents and body shops throughout the UK, Dean Thatcham. again, your thoughts in terms of, the sort of dangers of taking on too much, or us being all consumed in all of these various technologies rather than focusing on the here and now, I suppose.
Yeah, well, a lot of people that I talk to and collaborate with around the industry will totally recognise when I say I've been a long time advocate for repairers, especially kind of SMEs, to kind of choose their path rather than just take everything. The days of being able to just open the door and take every single car type, material, powertrain, etc., has really gone for the SME. So to be able to specialise, brand, technology, material, become absolute experts in something, and that can be experts in the volume stuff that's easier to do, or become experts in the niche stuff that's harder to do. Doesn't matter, but find your wheelhouse, get into it, stay in it, work with your work providers to ensure that they know where your wheelhouse is, and really be good at what you do. You mentioned Ollie's statement from an early thing. I totally agree with Ollie's statement around temperance, except really in one area. And I know I'm personally, beating the same drum time and time again, but skills is not somewhere where this industry can afford temperance. I think it needs to invest in people. Needs to invest in its existing workforce to try and upskill it, and it desperately needs more youth. I think it's been said enough times. The average age of technicians is going to create a future problem, and the technology boom is creating a now problem, and you push those two things together and you've got potential for catastrophe. So I think temperance, yes, don't go out and spend loads, don't go out and spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a new piece of equipment that you've not got any guarantees will fix tomorrow's cars as well as today's. But invest in your people now. Do it now. Treat it like productive maintenance. If you've got a piece of equipment, you look after it, you maintain it, and you try to increase the longevity of that piece of equipment and its efficiency through productive maintenance. Treat your workforce the same way. It's an absolute essential now to kind of have some spare parts around in that workforce, and don't wait until your workforce has hit rock bottom and can't go any further, because I think that's the danger. I think the industry, there are some really good people in the industry at the front of this thinking about that. And I know, we work closely with Solus. I know Solus are one of those entities, but the industry needs more, and it needs more youth to come in and be able to cope with both sides of that kind of talent crisis that the industry is likely to, if it's not facing already, it will be facing over the next 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. And we will talk people again more shortly, but it's certainly a message that resonates on every webinar that we're on. We talk, as much as we talk about technology, it's then people to power this technology, if you like. The two don't work independent of each other.
Mark, I mean, if I could just cut in, I think one of the things you don't necessarily always need to invest immediately. I think this is the thing. It's not just a question of what you invest in, it's when you invest. And I think, I'm thinking of a large German OEM who has a 3D printing center of excellence. They don't do it themselves, but they have the knowledge base to know what they want out of it. And then they know from there when to invest. And I think that's probably the best bet probably for the body shop industry out there, is just, be aware of stuff, build up your knowledge of it, and then choose when it's right for you.
It's really interesting thought.
Buy loads of kit today.
Yeah, because from that, we're going to see probably likely far more collaboration, whether it be between repairers, whether it be between suppliers, industry suppliers that potentially we've never even kind of, heard of before. So it's
great. I mean, we're being approached now by people who, are offering new solutions and stuff like that, and, telling us where they're actually at with it. And then, by having those conversations, you're going to start thinking, well, when's that right for me?
Yeah, Yeah, great stuff. Great, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. And as I say, Dean, we'll come back to the people side of things in a second. But, this year, without a shadow of a doubt, Andrew's already mentioned it. We're all wholly aware of, what impact it's had across the world, really. But what do you think are the most kind of pressing matters relating to motor claims, repairs right now? And are these areas in hand, obviously aside from kind of the volume and, if you like, survival, I suppose, in some cases. Dean, your thoughts there? Is it back to the skills and the people?
It's relatively simple. It's electrification. The car park will grow significantly with EV vehicles over ICE vehicles over the years. Whether we reach the 2030 deadline that the government have set or not, I don't know. And I'm certainly not the economist that can do all the calculations to work out just what's necessary. But it is going to happen. It's going to be gradual, but the underlying problems will creep up and bite. One of the big projects that we're looking at right now is exploring a variation in requirements for quarantine in case of battery damage. Yeah, that's a massive problem just waiting to hit. At the moment, it's an underlying problem. The volumes aren't really impacting. But if that gradual increase suddenly becomes a rapid increase in volumes and that problem doesn't get resolved, if Solus have got 3 Kias on site with battery damage, they've got to store those vehicles for, I think it's around 7 days, but 20 meters separation vehicle to vehicle. We're going to have car parks full of electric battery operated vehicles just in isolation mode before they can be damage assessed and worked on. So I think there's the main one. And I think that's where the industry really needs to start to focus. I don't mean to be the doom and gloomer, but I really do have serious concerns for the health and safety of the technical workforce and the non-technical workforce operating around the automotive sector right now, because it's such a significant change and it comes with such potential disastrous outcomes if we get it wrong, that I can't express how critical it is for the industry to get ready for it.
Huge implications, huge. And, one of those that you've just highlighted there, and again, 2021, we're a few weeks away. Oh, I daren't say it, but, 9 years then from this 2030 deadline, whether we actually get there or not is another thing. But yeah, you can only see all the efforts and energies going into electric vehicles and then becoming obviously, the vehicle of the road. So, Kath, kind of same question to you, obviously from a claims side of things. So, but what are the real pressing matters at the moment? Again, aside from hopefully volumes, what are we really sort of casting your eyes on at the moment?
I suppose it's a bit of a build on what Dean was saying. I think for me, it's how we can make sure that the specialist services can work together, where we need to bring in specialist suppliers to do certain things. I don't think at the moment we're very good at knitting it all together so that we can control the cycle time as efficiently and reduce that for the customer. And I think that'll become more important as we move through time, because I think you will have more specialist suppliers for certain things that you need to build together and work together to complete a job, potentially.
Yeah. And I suppose that will all stem from, the ethanol process, i.e. identifying exactly what that vehicle is and what's involved in that process.
I think all that will become more complex, Mark, to be honest, around, how are we going to rate vehicles? How do we really understand what is on that car? It's going to become more difficult to know that, because there'll be more customer choice, even more than there is today. So, there's probably a chance that an instruction is going to go through to the body shop and, they're going to have to understand what that car actually is that they're being asked to repair.
Hi everyone, we hope you're enjoying this webinar. Just a quick thank you once again to all of our corporate partners and partners on screen now. Now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, identification will be key, especially when you're, involved with these electric vehicles and the voltage that they will ultimately be able to put out. And Andrew, from a repairer perspective, I know you've seen the industry from many sides, and you still do. Again, where would you where would your attentions be, if you like, or what are the matters, really impacting on yourselves at the moment?
Well, firstly, at Dean, we actually haven't got any Kias on fire in the car park or anything like that. So, no, I mean, this was one of the areas we picked up on many months ago. Which is, as I say, even during the height of the pandemic, we were very much focused on the change in technology and can see an increase in electrified vehicles coming through. So managing things like quarantine and that is something that we've kind of been there, done that one. That's organised now. But I think there's still, and I think the point that Kath raised about is identifying some of these vehicles. It's not just about the powertrains, but it's things like where we're going to get optional systems or function on demand and much higher levels of customization on the vehicles. And I'm talking putting big chrome wheels on them. I'm talking about the options you can get from the factory in that now. On the, electrical systems, the ADAS systems, that going forward is going to be a very big challenge to overcome and identify what's on the car, what version is it, how does it function. And I know there's customers out there already disconnecting their vehicles from over-the-air updates. So what version of software is the vehicle running? And obviously there's a chance of, a body shop upsetting the customer when they update their software to carry out a repair and replacement operation. So, as I say, I think the problem, what's sitting in the background at the moment is technology has not paused because of COVID. And if nothing else, the guys have been sitting there in the lab still inventing new stuff because, they're not being disturbed by meetings and other things like that. So, it's still out there and it's coming our way very, very quickly. And I think this is the problem. As I say, we absolutely cannot take your eye off the ball at the moment, despite all the very many great challenges that are facing businesses today.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true points. Yeah, and really interesting times. Keep the messages coming in the chat, by the way. It's great to see people engaging with the session and sharing their thoughts. It's brilliant because it adds to the conversation. Again, likewise, feel free to drop some questions in the Q&A. I'm sure these guys will quite happily pick them up and do the best they can with them. But do keep sharing your thoughts in there. It's brilliant to see. So thank you very much for that. So we're going to talk about people and skills now. So we've already said, technology without the right people doesn't essentially work. There's some great initiatives at present within the industry. Are we winning, Dean? Are we winning with this people and skills thing at the moment, do you think?
Oh, what a great question. Slowly. I think the drive, quite rightly, is focused on the generational challenge, I think, that we have. Put it into context, I think I saw that it was suggested that the average age of technicians in this sector as an engineering sector when compared to other engineering sectors is about 10 years difference. So I think it's around 40. I think it was reported to be around 48 in this sector. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I do know from government statistics in engineering, it's 38. The average age of an engineer is 38. So that, if those stats are right, we've got a generational challenge that we've got to resolve. But I think we can resolve it. I think we've got enough. I think we've got enough irons in the fire to resolve the sustainability challenge, I guess. But it's the tech boom again, and the need for adapting the skills of the existing workforce at the same time as investing in a new workforce really is a challenge for the sector. I mean, let's not lie, training staff is a cost, but there's the famous old analogy, I can't take the thing for it. I train them and they leave. Can I really afford to train them, or can you afford not to? But again, I think it can be resolved. I think it can be resolved through sustainable investment in apprenticeships. But we won't get it if we haven't got it in the mindsets of our managers and leaders from across the sector. So let's not forget that while we need to invest in apprenticeships, we also need to do a significant amount of investment in the management and leadership. As Andrew said, the businesses have got to become more structured, more agile to cope with the tech boom, and that requires good, sound management and leadership as well.
Yeah, and that's certainly an area that we've touched upon. We had a recent session with Dr. Linda Lee Davies. I referred to it earlier in the day, where we looked at management and leadership. And again, it's that whole sort of holistic approach to business. And you've said it there yourself. It's great if we get all the technicians under the sun into the industry, but again, how do we deal with them, integrate them into business, manage them correctly, and ensure that they're on the right journey? So yeah, it's certainly a part that I think we need to be aware of. And Andrew, again, is there more we need to do, can do? Again, kind of context of obviously where you're at the moment, and also, think about independent repairers and the small guys. How do we all contribute towards this?
I think there's clear gaps out there. I mean, this morning I had one of those automated surveys come through from a training provider asking me about, to answer a number of questions regarding the training offerings coming our way. And as I progressed into this survey, I was just thinking, well, actually, this is you steering me to the products that you've got, and this is not somebody asking me what I need for my business. And it was, and in the end,
put that survey back, Andrew, and not change it.
I could tell by the spelling mistakes, Steve. But sure, no, I mean, it was quite disappointing because, as I say, I would much rather, suppliers, training providers, etc., picked up the phone to me and said, kind of, what are you needing? And I think, if anything else, I think the needs are going to get a lot faster. I can't sit down and start scoping out today what I think I'm going to be needing in 2021, because by the end of 2021 it could be different. So I think we need to be a lot more reactive in terms of providing what is needed. There's definitely gaps that need filling in, and I was speaking to somebody recently regarding some of the background of some of like the ADAS technologies or automated driving, and they raised the point that lots of the background knowledge to things like radar, etc., is A-level physics kind of work. And I said, well, historically, we've not recruited from that background for the automotive industry, or we're just not of that generation where that was just part of the curriculum. So I think, we need to fill in some of these gaps and move a lot faster in terms of what's there, but also go to the customer and actually ask them, what do they need? Because it's going to be very, very different around the industry, particularly if people do go into specializations and picking up certain things. They're going to, come across stuff they've not seen before, and they need to find somewhere that can provide the right training that is up to the minute and is correct.
Really interesting points around the future skill sets, and I suppose the pond we're fishing in for new recruits in the industry. It is a case of broadening that horizon somewhat, and going beyond what we know, I suppose, at the moment, because those jobs and some of the technologies we've discussed, who's to say in a few years' time a body shop won't have a 3D printing specialist in-house who's doing whatever they need to do. It's it's truly exciting. And Kath, from your side, from where you sit, again, you see things obviously slightly different. But again, do you see that kind of the skill sets, the management, the leadership thing, is that becoming, increasingly important in terms of your supply chain and how you communicate and operate with them?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. And I think we all focus on retention of our people because, as we touched on before, the cost and investment of training, etc. Unfortunately, not many people start out their career wanting to work in insurance. It's probably not the most attractive career. But I actually think maybe we're missing a trick, that the technology and development it is attractive to young people now, because, the roles that we had previously, aren't the same roles anymore. We need potentially people that are more IT savvy, the next generation, and a lot of they obviously don't drive at the point they're making some key decisions around their education. And I think once you explain to some young people around the opportunities there are across the industry, then it does spark that interest. So I think we just need to do that more as an industry to make people aware of the opportunities that we do have. And it's not all just about sitting on the phone or taking a claim or repairing a panel. There are a variety of different roles now across our industry that will need, and that will just grow further.
Completely agree. I think we're all too humble sometimes in marketing ourselves as an industry, and how exciting it is. Really, maybe we're all old and cynical now. I don't know, but so let's just hop back to vehicle construction, connectivity, onboard technology, powertrains. We kind of talked or touched upon all of those areas. Vehicle manufacturers are ploughing huge sums of money into this kind of stuff year on year. And again, we've probably touched on it in terms of, the ethanol process. Will a vehicle make the claim and all these things? But how will the supply chain evolve to manage these advances? And again, we hinted at segmentation, and Dean, you sort of suggested that people should, get themselves in their what should we say, in their realm that they're comfortable in and they specialise in. Is this just, is this again natural evolution in the industry? Are we going to see segmentation in a big way? Your thoughts, Dean?
Yes and no. Sorry, that's a bit of a thingy answer, isn't it? I'm going to blend it with an analogy I heard Dave Shepherd use recently. I think there will always be general practitioners in the industry, and I think there will be specialists. And if you're slightly unwell, if your car's slightly unwell, you're going to take it to a general practitioner, and most of the time they're going to be able to treat it and send you back. If it's seriously unwell, you're running it into the A&E, and they're doing some really serious triage on it and trying to work out what happens next. And then, as we're seeing across the industry, cars are being moved about more than ever to try and move them into a location where the business has the capability to repair that particular make and model, that particular type of technology. And I think that's where the industry will move to. General practitioners will always exist, but there will be specialist positions where certain technology has to go to, because it's more efficient to move the car to where the capability is than to try to keep drafting the capability to where the car ends up.
Great stuff, thank you. And shall we thank Dave for that analogy? Are you now trademarking it?
I'm trademarking it. He came up with hospitals. I'm talking about general practitioners.
Okay, great stuff. And Kath, from your perspective, again, how does this sort of implicate from a claims, from an insurer perspective?
I think for us, it's around understanding the mix of work that's going to come through the door and making sure we've got capacity in the right places at the right time. And I think that will change over the next few years. We'll see a bit of a hybrid, and probably as volumes change, that will move over time. But I think that will be our biggest challenge, making sure that we've got that end-to-end supply chain that can manage all aspects for us as the car park moves over the next few years.
Yeah, and I suppose from an insurer perspective, you're not teaching people to suck eggs, but you've got a whole host of suppliers out there who will be doing various elements of what you do. Recovery just being one example that you would be aligned with and utilising. So it's a far broader remit, if you like, I suppose, from where you sit. And Andrew, from specifically from a repairer's perspective, what's your thoughts around segmentation by vehicle model, by type of damage? Again, does it align with kind of Dean's thoughts there?
Oh God, you're going to get me to agree with Dean again.
No, don't do it, Andrew. Don't hurt yourself.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I think there is going to be a mix of both out there. I think Dean got it quite right with the analogy. I think there are going to be some people who probably will take the specialisation route. That may suit their model. It's a very difficult one to predict volumes with, but it is easier probably to be able to plan your investment if you're going to go down the route of specialisations or specific brands. I think in terms of if you're looking at by, say, vehicle damage type, etc., I think it becomes very, very difficult then to actually accurately predict the damage that's on the vehicle. And I think that's going to get even harder as you start to move in towards electrified vehicles and more automated vehicles. So I think, the smart money to my mind would be onto generalization, but perhaps working in a bit of a cleverer way to kind of manage the cross technologies, to give yourself that greater capability. So, in the middle of this decade, we'll probably start to see an awful lot of hydrogen vehicles appearing. It's basically an electric vehicle with gas handling. It's not, maybe that's an oversimplification of it, but, if you build up the modules of the capability logically and sensibly, I believe you can handle this stuff. It won't be easy by a long shot, but as I say, people have to make their own decision what works for them. As I say, it depends on where your area is, what your customer market is, and that's the other crucial factor is, if I specialize, can I look after all my customers? If I've got a customer, say if I'm a fleet body shop repairing for, a large fleet, like, I don't know, Royal Mail or something like that, can I do one brand? Or does that fit with the Royal Mail? I think you've got to keep the customer in focus all the way through this.
Yeah, great stuff, great opinions there, and I think you're absolutely right. It's fascinating to see how this will be ultimately driven, divided up, what will influence it long term and of course short term. And you've got to satisfy the customer's demand. So I suppose coming to the more immediate, is there any one area relating to the future of repair that you would put before all else at present? We may have already touched on the various subject matters, but what would it be and why? Dean, straight to you.
Yeah, we've already touched on it. It's EV, and I think where I would focus on, if I were running a body shop today, my focus would be on making sure that my whole team, everybody that had the potential to come in any sort of close proximity with a high voltage vehicle, had a full awareness of the health and safety risks associated with it. I always put it only takes one small mistake by a absolutely qualified, competent technician in an uninformed and ill-prepared environment to create a catastrophic situation. The human nature is, if your friend and colleague is in harm's way, is being hurt, you're going to run to them and you're going to try to help them. And the human chain that could be the consequence in that area, that's the biggest concern that I have, and it's a huge concern. We don't want that to happen in the middle of a workshop. Potential loss of life is too big when all it takes is some very simple signposting and some very basic level of training and awareness to let people know in the vicinity of an electric vehicle that electrocution is a real possibility.
Yep, very true words there. And Andrew, in terms of, again, from where you see things, what would be, you'd be putting before all else, I say, but what would it be, what would you be prioritising right now?
Sounds like a cop-out to say I don't think we can focus on one thing at the moment. As I say, I think we'll all be having to become multi-skilled and adaptable with this side of stuff. But I think if anything, and I think it was something that Kath touched on earlier, it's got to be the customer again. That, we're moving into areas of technology, and if we think it's difficult for us in the automotive industry to understand some of these technologies, and you've got dentists and lawyers or whatever out there that perhaps don't understand the technology, it's going to be very, very easy to frighten them, or to lose that confidence with them. And we need to be able to give the customer ultimately that confidence to know that their vehicle has been properly looked after. And you get all this talk about things like range anxiety, etc., with batteries on electric vehicles, and as Kath touched on there with 3D printing, you can't make 3D printed components for my car. Well, good news to you, they're actually out there. As I say, earlier this year in Germany, I saw a brake caliper. It's been printed, and that's on the production car today. These things are actually out there already. It's a science. It's not a kind of tin pot garage industry anymore. But we need to get our customers to understand this stuff, and we need to get the customers confident that we understand this stuff and we can manage it properly, and we can prove and validate we've carried out the repair properly and reinstated their vehicle to them correctly. And we, as I say, it just got to take away the fear factor.
Yeah, and I suppose that just comes with time and more exposure to these things, really.
Well, have you got time, though, is the question. I mean, as I say, I could get one of these new vehicles, could rock into a body shop anywhere in the UK tomorrow. And you've got to give that customer the confidence tomorrow. And it's something you may never have seen before. And that's the problem. This stuff's coming out very, very quickly. And you've got to get in that position. You can't sort of like, we've got a car in, well, I'll book myself in for a training course and I'll go and do a bit of research. No, it's just not viable. You've got to be ahead of this. And it's it's very, very fast moving, but the customer is central to all of this. It's what we're here for.
Great stuff. Great thoughts, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. Now, I want to move on to a subject matter we kind of, I think personally is going to come to the fore again, next year once we kind of start to see things with a bit more clarity, but around environmental practices and green credentials. And, what role is this likely to play in the coming years, and how can will we adapt as an industry? Kath, your thoughts on that?
I think actually it's going to become more important than it has been. I think there's a lot more focus recently around climate control, and I think there'll be more pressure on the industry of what we can do to support that, whether that be repair over replace, all the stuff that we do already, but, how can we support it? So I think we will have to do more in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And from a repair perspective, Andrew, how do you see those things?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely not going to go away. I mean, if you speak to many of the OEM, I think they're kind of thinking that many governments around the world are kind of sleepwalking on this one, that, if we replace all the cars with electric cars, we're going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement target, and it's just not going to happen. So I think the expectation that there's going to be far more legislation or far more other drivers coming into this for an entire greener automotive and transportation sector, and I can't see how we could possibly avoid that. We have to think about these things. It doesn't have to be a bad thing in itself. It sounds like, okay, we've got to think about all sorts of green things and having non-plastic cups in reception and stuff like that, but also, it's about resource use. And resource costs you money. So if you avoid using the resource in the first place, you're not spending money, and you're actually not damaging the environment. So I think it just comes down to an efficient operating model, really, for your business. But it is absolutely going to come. And of course, it's something that customers are very aware of, and everybody's talking about. It's very much on the agenda. And yeah, absolutely. As soon as we get into a better position, I suspect it's going to be very much back on the agenda, or as soon as towns start flooding and areas like that, it just pops straight back up on it every winter. It's on the agenda. We've got to meet it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, again, it's one of those things that's different, is a different challenge, hence why, and again, but I think we will, as an industry, adapt to it. And
I think it's one of those areas where you can actually start developing a long-term strategy now. You can just start thinking about it. It's not one of those areas that you need to immediately massively invest in. I think it's just maybe just start looking at your business model, your operations, to start giving it some thought now and saying, well, actually, what could we do, and what are we wasting, and what do we really not need?
Yeah, and there's probably loads of little small steps along the way that you can take, which bit by bit will start to tick those boxes. Dean, I'm going to come across you, kind of jumping across to the last question, because I see we're running out of time rapidly. Goodness me, we could talk forever. So what initiatives have you underway to support the industry, sort of the future of repair, and how do you think we, and I use the royal we as an industry, can all work together to kind of create a brighter, more sustainable future?
Well, let's start with the first part of that question then. So one of the things that we are very focused on now at Thatcham is developing a blended learning vision and capability. We've spoken several times on this webinar specifically about the need for training and the need for development, and we've got a traditional industry with a traditional bunch of training providers, Thatcham amongst them, out there in the marketplace, that demand the technician leaves the body shop, travels across the country to spend a couple of days in a training centre, And I think those days have to be limited. I think it's still going to be essential for some parts of the training, but I think the technology that we're seeing in the cars and everywhere else just allows us to take that leap, and I think that's where we're going to be. We've been doing it very successfully through this COVID window at Thatcham in particular. You know, I came onto one of these earlier in the year and spoke about how we were keeping 90% of our apprenticeships on programme, progressing, using blended learning, online classrooms, academy content. And I think that can help the repair community massively in the long term, reduce the total overhead of training, and therefore make it more possible, make it more commercially viable. So I'm quite excited about that for 2021 and way beyond. I think the possibilities of reinventing the training world and the way we educate our staff across the sector, both technical and non-technical, is a really exciting thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, I was speaking to a repairer only earlier today who was absolutely of the same mindset in terms of online training. How much more beneficial, easy to access, not so much downtime, cost to the business, etc. So I think absolutely it's all moving in the right direction there. I just want to, that's probably a lovely way to round off, because I just want to acknowledge all the comments that have come in. We've certainly seen them. I've seen the most recent one, average key to key days or cost for EVs and PHEVs. I don't know if there's any information out on market. I don't think I've seen any to date, but there may be some, and we will ask the relevant questions to see if we can scoop anything up there. Just looking at some of the comments or questions come in, there's one around labour rates from Paul Smith, talking about sort of low labour rates. Again, Amazon equivalent, £13 per hour. Is it making the industry attractive to skilled technicians? That's kind of an ongoing debate and is bubbling away and has been for many years. There's Carl Henderson talking about 3D printing. The benefits, wouldn't it benefit to do 3D printing, repairs or replacement? Again, absolutely conversations to be had around that, no doubt about it. Crash avoidance systems, what will the investment be, or when will the investment give a return on investment? I suppose that's kind of how long's a piece of string, and it depends on what we've probably discussed about your segmentation, your target audience, all these kind of bits and pieces that you've got to throw in the pot. I don't think there's going to be a definitive answer on that. Andrew, you're looking like you're mulling things over in your head.
I always do a lot of thinking. It helps. I think very slowly, so I need a run up. Going back to the point, I think it was Mark Sherry raised the question there regarding key-to-key times for EVs. I mean, nothing I'm seeing at the moment is convincing me that the key-to-key time should be in excess of a conventional vehicle. It's just a different repair process. Again, the proviso on that is, but again, still no different from internal combustion engine vehicles, is the provision of parts. But in terms of actually carrying out the labour operations and carrying out the repair operations, I don't see why it should be different. I think we're going to learn good and bad technologies and uncomfortable technologies with that side of field, and we certainly are, and it's to say, but yeah, there should be no difference. And again, we've got to really keep that in focus for the customer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
3D printing, yes, I think 3D printing is coming to body shop very, very soon. I think it's something we should be absolutely looking into. As I say, I mean, they're going to be firing another 3D printing machine up to the International Space Station later next year. And it's appearing everywhere, and I think it's one of those technologies that people need to start getting confidence with. But it is absolutely like, if you're going to go along the route of PAS 10125, those sort of things, it comes down to process, qualification, materials, all those sort of controls in place. But, they're there, it's a science now. So like many others. So like most of these things, it's just about defining all the sciences between them, whether it's augmented reality, 3D printing, AI. Define the science and prove it's doing what you need it to do.
Brilliant. What a way to round off. There you go, you see, and we probably set ourselves up for another 5 or 10 webinars in the near future with those subject matters. So huge thank you to Dean, Andrew and Kath, and we'll obviously a huge thank you to our corporate partners and our partners, BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Emacs, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Mercer, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams Automotive Finishes, as well as our partners, Aztec, the Green Part Specialists in DARSA, Prasco, and the Innovation Group. Thank you to everyone for joining us. It's been a super session. Really, really enjoyed that. We could have talked for hours. In fact, we probably will. I'm going to scoop up all the comments. So drop any comments in the chat there. Let these guys know what you thought of the session. Good, bad, ugly. Let us know where your train of thought is in terms of the future. We'll pick up all the questions. As I say, we've probably lined ourselves up for some features and some further webinars. Big thank you, Dean, Andrew, and Kath, once again. Really, really good session. Thanks so much, guys. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you all soon.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Bye.